Hey everybody, this is Hapi, and this is my guide to Battlemaster in Dragon Quest X. Battlemaster is not one of the most complicated jobs in Dragon Quest X, but there are still levels to playing it well. So let's get into that. At a basic level, your job is simple. You deal constant high physical damage without dying. Battlemaster is a very selfish damage dealer. Most of your value comes from your own damage and your own buffs and your ability to have high burst windows. You are not here to heal the party, protect everyone, or fix every mistake. You're here to hit the boss hard, keep your damage uptime as high as possible, and stay alive. But that last part matters a lot. Staying alive. Being a Battlemaster does not give you an excuse to keep dying. You are fragile, but you are not helpless. You have survival tools like Miracle Slash, Hurt Converter, and your ability to position well. If you die, you lose time, you lose buffs, you lose tension, and you force the rest of the party to recover from your mistakes. No build is going to make you a strong DPS if you keep dying. Now, let's talk about the core skills that you will use. One of your most important skills that you are going to use is Quick Arts. Quick Arts gives you two of your most powerful buffs, 2 stages of attack up and movement speed up. Attack up is vital because Battlemaster's main job is damage. If you are attacking without your attack buff, you are losing an incredible amount of value. And the movement speed buff is very important. Battlemaster is fragile, so being able to move out of attacks faster makes a huge difference. Quick Arts is not just a damage buff, but it is also one of your most important comfort and survival tools. Another very important skill is Feel the Burn. Feel the Burn gives you tension when you take damage, and tension is extremely powerful in Dragon Quest X. Tension increases the damage of your next attack, so if you can keep attacking safely while building tension, your damage becomes much higher. But the important word is safely. Feel the Burn does not mean you should intentionally eat every attack. It rewards you for surviving damage, but not for being careless and dying. Your third most important self buff is Hurt Converter. Hurt Converter lets you recover HP when you deal damage. This helps your survivability while maintaining high damage output, especially when you are staying aggressive during safe windows. But just like Feel the Burn, this doesn't make you immortal. Hurt Converter helps you recover from damage, but it doesn't save you from attacks that instantly kills you, knocks you out of position, or causes the party to collapse. A bad Battlemaster will use Hurt Converter as an excuse to play recklessly, but a good Battlemaster uses Hurt Converter to stay aggressive during safe damage windows. Now, let's move on to the Battlemaster-specific attacking skills. For Battlemaster, there are 2 main ones I want to focus on, a cut above and a cut beyond. The other Battlemaster attack skills like Blind Man's Biff, Double Edge Slash, and Claptrap are mostly outdated moves from a time when the game was played very differently. They're not completely unusable, but they're not relevant to the modern Battlemaster gameplay, and they are not worth focusing on in this type of guide. For newer players, your time is much better spent learning how to use a cut above and a cut beyond safely and consistently. Both are strong single target attacks, but they are not buttons you can mash without thinking. A cut above is one of your bread and butter damage options. It hits hard, but it also has a very long animation. If you use it at the wrong time, you can easily get stuck in a place and die before you are able to move. A cut beyond is basically the charge time version of a cut above. It's stronger and its animation is shorter than a cut above, but it's still not instant, and since it is a charge time skill, you cannot spam it. The basic rule is simple. Use a cut above when you are not being targeted. The boss is not about to use a dangerous attack, and you know you have just enough time to finish the animation safely. Don't just press it trigger happy because you have it. A bad Battlemaster mashes a cut above and hopes nothing bad happens. A good Battlemaster watches the enemy first, then chooses whether they have enough time to use it. This is one of the biggest differences between a decent Battlemaster play and a good Battlemaster play. Your damage is not just about picking the strongest attack, it's about knowing when you can safely commit to that attack. One more Battlemaster-specific attack worth mentioning is Hotshot. Hotshot is a charge time skill, so you cannot spam it. But when you have it, it can be a good idea to use it before a high damage attack. The reason is simple. Hotshot can raise your tension, and Battlemaster gets a lot of value spending tension on strong attacks. So don't think of Hotshot as one of your main damage buttons. Think of it as a setup tool. If Hotshot gives you tension, then following it with a big hit can be a really strong use of that window. Now, let's get into the weapon specific skills. And for that, I want to start with dual wielding one-handed swords. In my opinion, dual wielding swords is the de facto way to play Battlemaster. It has the best set of skills for what Battlemaster already wants to do, and it synergizes extremely well with the job's natural strengths. But before we talk about the skills themselves, there is one very important setup detail. At the skill master, you can put a skill called Dual Mastery into your 160 to 200 point slot. Dual Mastery increases the damage dealt by your second hand weapon, and this is extremely important for dual sword Battlemaster. The reason this matters is because dual wielding gives your attacks an extra hit from your second sword. For single hit attacks like your regular attack or ultimate blade, you get a second hit. For multi-hit attacks, you get an additional hit added to the skill. Falcon Slash will hit 3 times instead of 2, Giga Slash hits all enemies twice instead of once. This is what makes dual sword so good on Battlemaster. You are taking a job that already benefits heavily from tension, multi-hit attacks, burst windows, and self buffs, and then adding even more hits on top of that. Now let's talk about the skills. Falcon Slash is going to be the bread to the butter that is a cut above. A cut above is stronger, but Falcon Slash is much faster and much safer. It does not deal as much damage, but it still does a very respectable amount, and because the animation is so quick, it can be used with much lower risk. Learning when to use Falcon Slash and when to use Cut Above is one of the most fun parts of Battlemaster, as it creates a type of risk-reward system. If you have a safe opening, a Cut Above gives you stronger damage, but if the boss is about to move, turn, or attack, Falcon Slash can let you keep dealing damage without committing to a long animation. Next up, we have Miracle Slash. Miracle Slash is a very practical skill because it heals you. The healing is separate to the healing you get from Hurt Converter, so the two can work together. That gives you much better survivability while still dealing chip damage. Miracle Slash is not your biggest damage button, but it's useful because it lets you keep yourself alive without completely giving up a turn or without damaging the enemy. Next up, we have Giga Slash. Giga Slash is a great light damage based AoE attack that hits enemies around you, and because you are dual wielding, it hits the enemies twice. That gives dual sword Battlemaster much better versatility when dealing with multiple enemies. Now, let's start talking about the CT skills, or the charge time skills. Giga Gash is very similar to Giga Slash, but it's stronger. Because the damage is so high, it can even be still worth using against a single opponent. Just like Giga Slash though, it's an AoE that hits everyone around you twice because you are dual wielding swords. Next up we have Ultimate Blade. Ultimate Blade is a powerful single hit attack that hits twice because you're dual wielding, and it's one of your best places to spend tension. The animation is not very long and the hit is so strong it works really well with having high tension. Next up we have Phoenix Dance. Phoenix Dance is a very strong and very beautiful skill. It hits 4 times 5 because you're dual wielding, and it also increases your crit rate afterwards. Because of that critical rate boost, Phoenix Dance is very important when you're about to deal a bunch of burst damage. You generally want to use it before your other major attacks because the increased crit rate can improve the skills you use afterwards. This is especially useful before multi-hit attacks like a Cut Above, a Cut Beyond, since those attacks hit multiple times, each giving you another chance to benefit from the increased crit rate. So Phoenix Dance is not just a damage skill, but it is also a setup skill for your burst window. Falcon Slash is similar to Phoenix Dance as a multi-hit charge time skill, but it doesn't increase your crit rate when you use it. It can feel a little bit underpowered compared to your other options, but it's still very useful, especially after Phoenix Dance because it benefits from the increased crit rate. Overall, Dual Swords works extremely well with Battlemaster's natural strengths. Ultimate Blade and Giga Gash are excellent skills to spend tension on. Phoenix Dance can set up for stronger burst windows, especially before a Cut Above and a Cut Beyond, Falcon Slash gives you a faster, safer option when a cut above is too risky, and Giga Slash and Giga Gash give you AoE, and Miracle Slash gives you extra survivability. That's why dual swords are my main recommendation for Battlemaster. Next, let's talk about Hammer Battlemaster. Similar to swords, hammers are dual wielded. This means they get the same basic dual wielding benefit. Your attacks gain an additional second hand hit. Hammer also gets dual mastery from the skill master, as well as the exclusive dual mastery too. Make sure to add those to your skill lineups because they are very valuable. Compared to dual swords, Hammer does not synergize quite as naturally with Battlemaster's base kit, but it gives you good AoE options, useful utility, and a decent earth DPS damage. Weight Break is a niche skill that lowers an enemy's weight. It's not always useful, but when weight matters, it can be helpful. Shatter Shield lowers an enemy's defense. Later bosses can become immune to defense down, but not every enemy is. So when you are able to use it, it is very useful as defense down increases your damage. MP Break is another super niche skill. It reduces an enemy's MP, which is not useful in most fights, but there are some enemies with very powerful magic attacks, but also very low MP. Against those enemies, MP Break can be very useful and satisfying, as you can reduce their MP to 0 and completely prevent them from using magic attacks. Cancel Shot is a skill that has purpose. It essentially cancels an enemy's attack if they're in a wind-up animation, but it doesn't take away their turn. So if you cancel an enemy's attack, they'll just start up another one, and sometimes the other one can be even worse than the one you did before. Plus, some bosses later have immunity to cancel attack. Next up, we have Cracker Whack, which is a very good spammable AoE earth attack, and because you are dual wielding, it hits twice. This gives Hammer a nice option for dealing with groups of enemies around you as they don't have access to Giga Slash, as well as a good earth damaging attack. Stun Smash is also great because when it works, it can stun the enemies for a few seconds. Just keep in mind that many enemies and bosses later become immune to stun. Still, when an enemy can be stunned, it can be very satisfying to completely shut them down while they're trying to attack. This next CT skill is called Plate Impact. It's a charge time skill that does AoE earth damage, and it combines several other hammer attacks into one skill. It reduces defense similar to Shatter Shield, and it reduces their weight, and reduces both by 2 stages at once. It's a very fun skill to use when the enemy is vulnerable to said debuffs. Next we have Earth Crash, a charge time version of Cracker Whack, with very strong AoE damage, and it gives Hammer another attack that is good against groups of enemies. And lastly, we have Devil Crusher. Devil Crusher is a strong single target attack that deals extra damage to demon and material types. It's more situational, it's slightly underpowered, but it is a great place to spend your tension in when you have high tension, as that can still pump out massive damage. Overall, I think Hammer is great to keep as a backup or secondary weapon. Having defense down on command is very useful. The Hammer's AoE skills can be really useful in content with multiple enemies. I wouldn't recommend Hammer for general damage upkeep over dual swords, but it has a strong utility toolkit and can be especially useful in content like Astoltia Defense Force. So my view is simple. Dual swords are my main recommendations for Battlemaster, but Hammer is a very useful secondary option to understand. Now we have Greatsword. Greatsword is your Unga Bunga monkey brain option. Numbers wise, Greatsword has very high numbers, but it doesn't synergize with Battlemaster's kit as naturally as dual swords do. It's not bad. If you want something simple, direct, and fun, I don't think Greatsword is the wrong way to play the job. To start, we have Greatsword Guard. It is the only non-damaging skill Greatsword gets, and it's a good one. It gives you a buff that increases your parry rate, since Greatswords already have a naturally high parry rate. Increasing it even more can give you some extra protection for you to go wild. Just remember that this protection is still RNG based. Some attacks can go through the parry entirely. Next we have Dragon Smash. It's a decently fast and decently strong attack that deals extra damage to dragons. It's fine, but later on you'll start hitting your damage cap with it with tension, which means there is not much room to push its damage higher. Helicopter is an AoE attack. It's a bit slow, but it can be pretty fun, and it's always nice to have an option that can clear out waves of enemies. Frostfangs is another AoE attack, but with ice damage. It has a little bit more range, but it deals less damage in exchange for having a chance to freeze the enemy. Up next, we have Cutting Edge, which is supposed to be the bread and butter greatsword attack. The problem is that it's a single target hit with a very long animation, which feels somewhat redundant with a cut above. It can hit hard, but you're still dealing with the same issue. If you commit at the wrong time, you can get punished. Up next, we have Big Banga, which is a fire-based heavy damage version of Frostfangs. It's a charge time skill, and it doesn't have a chance to freeze the enemies, but it does a very high amount of fire-based damage. Up next, we have Unbridled Blade. It's a stronger charge time version of Cutting Edge, and it's not bad. It can be a good way to spend your tension, but it also has a long wind-up animation, so you still need to be careful when using it. And now we have Plasma Blade. It's a somewhat inconsistent electric multi-hit attack that on its own doesn't really feel like it's amazing DPS. But the trade-off is it can lower the enemy's fire resistance, and that can be very useful for Big Banga, or for party members who deal fire-based damage. And last we have Swirlwind, the higher damage charge time version of Helicopter. It's useful to have, especially when dealing with groups of enemies, but against single target bosses, I sometimes remove it and replace it with a different skill or stat increase because it's not always the most practical option. Overall, Greatsword is simple, strong, and fast, but it's also more committed. You get big hits and high numbers, but you don't get the same flexibility or safety or natural synergy that dual swords give you. If you like the Unga Bunga style, Greatsword can absolutely work, but for general Battlemaster play, I still prefer dual wielding swords. And last but certainly not least, we have our Coup de Grace, Tension Boost and Burn Rush. Tension Boost is fantastic because it puts you at max tension and also gives you tension lock, meaning your tension does not immediately go away after one attack. This is extremely powerful because it lets the first strikes of your attacks deal immense damage. For Battlemaster, this fits perfectly with the job it already wants to do. Build tension, create a burst window, and hit as hard as possible. Great skills include Ultimate Blade and Giga Gash. Burn Rush is much more direct. It's just a very powerful multi-hit attack that hits several times and deals a fearsome amount of damage. The main advice for both of these Coup de Grace is just the same as the rest of Battlemaster skills. Don't waste them just because they appear. Use them when your buffs are active, when the boss is in a good position, and when you can actually take advantage of the burst window without getting yourself killed. So now that we've gone over all the weapons, how do you actually put this together in a real fight? Your basic priority as Battlemaster is pretty simple. First, always keep quick arts active. Your attack buff and your movement speed are too important to let fall off. Second, use Feel the Burn and Hurt Converter when you're actively fighting. Don't save these for later, try and use them when you can, and don't try and save Hurt Converter for when things have gone wrong and using it as a recovery tool. They are tools to help you stay aggressive while surviving, not tools to help you recover afterwards. Then, choose your attacks based on how safe the situation is. If you have a small opening, use a faster option like Falcon Slash. If you have a bigger opening, use a Cut Above. Cut Above is one of your most committed moves, but it's generally one of your strongest, so that is usually your go-to when you are in safety. If your charge time skills are ready and your boss is in a safe position, you can feel free to burst them down, starting with Phoenix Stance and then going through the others if you're playing sword, or just going through them with your other weapons. If the boss is about to attack, don't try and force another hit just because you can. Keep your buffs up, watch the boss, use the attacks that you can safely commit to, and don't die for an extra hit. And that's all for Battlemaster. I hope this guide helped you all. Thank you all so much for watching. This is my first time making this kind of video, and I'm glad you guys stuck with it to the end. See you.